Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Finance and Accounting Show. And today we have a great guest on because one of the things that I find interesting as I talk to a lot of different business owners is, getting back to the basics of what really drives a business. And part of that is finding a problem that people have that they're willing to pay for a solution. And today's guest is any business that you really don't hear a ton about, and that is insurance resolution. And so I'm interested to learn a little bit more about insurance claim resolutions, as well as, how you really created a business around something that you don't really hear a lot of businesses being created in that space. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Taylor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, before we jump into, talking about, Bellator claims and what you do in that with the resolution space, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, actually, I've been in real estate for about 18 years, which blows my mind because I don't feel like I'm that old, right? But yeah, so this year will be 18 years that I've been in real estate. And it's interesting because what I do is property claims, and my real estate background and understanding how that affects real estate, how insurance claims actually can affect real estate positively or negatively, has allowed me to kind of bring that into my current business, which is awesome. But ultimately, that was my training. And I did a lot of real estate short sales where I used to call the bank and be like, hey, Mr. Banker, you're going to probably lose a little bit of money. But if you help me help our mutual client, you're going to lose less money. And now I call the insurance company and say, hey, Mr. Adjuster, we both know that you owe a little bit more on this claim than you've paid. And if you help me help our mutual client, you're going to pay less than if we had to sue you, some version of that. And so it's really interesting how those two worlds have married up a little bit in my current world. And that's a little bit about, my background as far as professionally.
Awesome. I love it. I mean, and I think both of those are very relevant to, some core audiences that we speak to a lot are like, law firms, which as you mentioned about like, hey, the lawsuits that involve a lot of insurance companies, and as well as I think from finance and accounting professionals. And I think it's just learning about, that aspect because I would probably guess there are a lot of accountants out there who probably have clients who have experience issues with insurance companies, and they absolutely have no idea how to help them. They're just like, hey, take whatever you can get, when it's like, no, there could be a better option.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a good point. If I may just kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent, I actually work with a local financial planner, CPA, and he has me part of his team a little bit where I just talked to a lady that works with him on the financial planning side with a rental property that she has that kind of went south with her tenants in regards to some major issues that she filed a insurance claim and has been working on that. So he referred her to me because he knew what she was going through and was getting, as of right now, it's like $140,000 less than what she's supposed to be getting. And so like that is a big difference, right? That definitely comes into play regarding financial planning. If she has to come out of pocket with $140,000, well, that changes a lot of people's lives. So it's interesting you bring that up because I think it is very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, and that is I think that is a big part of, what I think is a place of ignorance for a lot of people is not knowing that, hey, there's something you can do about that, or there
Right.
are options. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. But I guess, before we jump deeply into that, as you talked about, kind of your background of, from real estate now to, hey, you're calling adjusters, and, for yourself is, did you originally see this as a business, opportunity? Like, hey, I can really see this growing as a business, or did you kind of fall into it as a proximity of some of the work you were doing prior?
So it's an interesting story, and I'll try to keep it short. But one of my best friends that I've known since I was 7 years old had introduced me to a guy that had a lot of freedom in his life and was able to do a lot of things that I was like, wow, this guy has what I'm looking for in my life. At that time, I recently had two kids in 16 months, like back to back. And so I had two kids under two, and I'm in real estate. Like, wow, like I don't know if I can handle like doing real estate weekends and nights and like really be at home with my children and raise my family. And so I started thinking about it, and he made a couple introductions, and that's kind of how it started. But I saw an opportunity that would give me more freedom, is really what I saw. And I knew that I could be good at it because as I did research on it and kind of like understood the process, I'm like, that's what I was doing for 4 or 5 years. Convincing banks to lose money is a pretty hard proposition, right? And I was really good at it. So I was like, you know what? This could be something that I could really get involved in and help a lot of people with something that they don't even know exists. And so you brought up that point that most people have no idea that I even exist, which in one respect is really good because it allows me to start gaining a little bit more and more market share for me, selfishly. But ultimately, it's bad because people don't really understand that you can have an advocate on your side. The insurance company will send out an adjuster for their company, and most people have no idea. Like, if you talk to most people, they make a claim once every, like, I think the average is once every 9 years or something like that. And so it's not like something that's on the top of your mind that you do over and over and over and over again and get really good at. But guess who does? The insurance adjuster does this at least 3, 5, 10 times a day and hundreds of times a year, if not thousands of times a year. And so they're very good at that. So
Gotcha. And I think that that is something that I will say, for reflecting on my experiences with insurance claims. I was just completely clueless to where you file an insurance claim, the adjuster comes out, and you just feel like, hey, I got to take whatever they give me. And
yeah.
I'm guessing that there are a lot of people who find themselves in that situation now. With at the time of us recording this, I mean, there was a hurricane that recently hit in Florida. So
Right.
when it comes down to natural disasters, do you get a lot of calls in situations like that when it comes down to insurance claims?
Yeah, in this case, specifically with the hurricane in Florida, I'm getting more calls from other adjusters that are like, hey, we are already so overwhelmed. And I think that happened a week ago today, right? If I remember correctly. And like, they're just like, hey, like, there's not enough people to help all of the people down here that need it. And so that's what I'm getting calls on. But usually, like in Colorado, where I'm located at, and we're licensed in multiple states, but in Colorado specifically, it's more hail. It's more hail related, that we get a lot of hailstorms and it's real dense and the air's thinner here. So it reaches a lot faster velocity when it hits. The ice balls are harder. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. So I work with a lot of people now that I've been in the industry going on. Actually, I think this month is 8 years that I've been in the industry. And so I just know a lot of people in the industry and get a lot of referrals after like a hailstorm happens. But the interesting thing that occurs in my business is the hailstorm occurs, and hurricane's a little bit different because it's like so devastating, right? But with the hailstorm, it occurs, and then usually 30, 60, 90 days after the hailstorm, or when people start getting denials or diminishment, being underpaid on their payments. And so I usually get involved about 60 to 90 days after a storm in Colorado for hail. But I would prefer to get involved up front because I know how to navigate the ship, right? And I always say it's better and easier for me to navigate the ship than try to raise a sinking ship up off the ocean floor, right? That's already going downhill. I can guide that a little bit better at the beginning of that stage. So
Hmm. Gotcha. Now, I guess for those of us that are a little ignorant of how the process usually goes, can you kind of, because you mentioned about getting involved on the front end versus, hey, someone, put in a claim, 60, 90 days later, they got a denial, then they're calling you. So it's
right.
just kind of like, how does that process usually work? Like, it's like on the front end, the hailstorm happens, what kind of unfolds next?
Yeah, usually hailstorm occurs, and it's either a roofer that is like knocking on the door and saying, hey, I can help you with the claim, or they know that they had hail, like the insured knows that they had hail, and so they'll call an insurance claim in. Insurance adjuster usually comes out and says, hey, we think there's $10,000 worth of damage. Here's a check for $5,000, because when you complete the roof, we'll give you the rest minus your deductible. And it kind of goes from there. And I would say, you know, the majority of claims are paid mostly fairly, right? Like mostly fair. I would say the majority of those claims are paid, because what I look at is, does the contractor have enough money to bring the insured back to pre-loss condition or better, depending on the type of policy that they have? And I think that's something important that we should maybe talk about here in a second, is the policy. And that's kind of where everything is dictated from. But ultimately, if say the contractor needs 20,000 and the adjuster only pays 10, then there's that $10,000 discrepancy. And most people wonder, like, why am I paying for insurance if the insurance company isn't going to pay the claim like what is needed? And right now, as I'm sure you're very well aware, being in the industry that you are, supply chain issues, material shortages, inflation, all of that stuff is not really taken into account, because the programs and the software that insurance companies use are lagging a little bit. And they say it's up to date, but you go look at what they pay for one sheet of plywood in their software, and then you go to Home Depot and look at that same thing, and you're like, there's a $30 difference. What is going on here? So really, ultimately, that's kind of the process. And then usually people get either frustrated or completely angry, and then I get involved. So I always say, I don't get involved when a claim is going really well, right? People are upset and frustrated, and then they call me to come in and really say, hey, what is fair and what is actually owed to the insured?
Mhm. And I think that's an important one because, especially for a lot of, the accountants and finance professionals that are working, like, if you have a client that, unfortunately, yeah, endures property damage, I mean, it can affect their business, and them getting the right, them getting, I guess you'd say made whole is
Yeah,
not just a factor of, hey, they just got their building fixed. It's like, hey, they're able to get their livelihood back in order.
right.
So I
Yeah,
mean that's a very important topic you bring up, and you talked a little bit about the policy, because you know I'm guilty of this myself. Of you get an insurance policy, someone says, oh, you need insurance, and you get an insurance policy, you have no idea really how to understand them or what's
right.
in them. You just call the first agent and you shop around for some prices. Oh, that price sounds reasonable. This insurance should cover that. And then you find out when you have your first claim you put in, like, oh, that's not covered under the insurance.
Right.
Any recommendations for people, like when they're doing that? Like, hey, how do you really break it down to understand what is in your insurance policy?
Right. So if you have a good relationship with your agent, if they're a captive agent or if they're an independent broker or something like that, that's really where it starts, is to make sure that that person understands your needs. Okay. Because the tenet of every insurance policy is indemnification, what you had just brought up, to make me whole as good or better than before the loss, depending on the policy. Right. So will it do that? Okay. One of the things that we saw after the Marshall fire here in Colorado is people were drastically underinsured because of those material shortages and pricing, like just crazy, like crazy pricing. And so the first and foremost, I think, is having a really good relationship with your agent that you know and trust and is looking out for your best interest and understands what is happening in the market, right, in regards to pricing of materials. And hey, look, I know you want the cheapest policy. Everybody does, until you make a claim, and that cheap policy and that cheap insurance becomes really expensive, because the insurance company is like, hey, thanks for all the premiums over the years. Now we're not going to really pay the claim as fairly as you'd like. So my recommendation is pricing second or third after getting the coverage that you need, making sure you're fully covered, and are working with an insurance agent or company that actually gives a crap. I mean, that's the best way to put it, right? And will actually look for your best interests. And that's the first and foremost. Like for me, I want cheap insurance too, because it's funny, in the back of your mind, you're like, I probably am not going to ever use that until you need it. right? And insurance is so different than any other business or industry because like you don't like your TV, you take it back to the electronics store, exchange it and get another TV. But after a loss occurs, you can't change the insurance that you had before the loss up until that point, right? And so it's impossible to go back and change that. So you need to make sure that the insurance that you have is the best coverage first and then pricing next or down the line.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's a great, great point. And I would again say for a lot of accounting, finance professionals, even the lawyers that watch, whether this show or they watch our show, Law and Finance. I think that's an important topic. Is if you're having a conversation with your clients, especially if you're having a conversation before an incident happens, it's just really advising them about, hey, making sure you have the right coverage versus just shopping for the lowest price because
Right.
sometimes you get what you pay for.
Right.
If it's the lowest price, it may not necessarily make you whole. Now, one of the things that I was very curious about as well is being in an industry that a lot of people don't know that your business exists in that that whole insurance process. They get a policy, something happens, they file a claim, they get denied. Most people have no idea what to do other than just call the insurance company and complain. They
Right.
don't know that I can actually bring in an advocate who knows this industry, who does this on a regular basis. So one of the things that stood out for me is, because you're that type of business, like how do you get the word out and start educating people on the fact that you exist?
Right. And you bring up a really interesting point, which is kind of a catch-22, is more people need to know that we exist and they don't. And it's a very small pool. However, the number one way that I get business is from referrals because I've been in the industry so long that people trust me and know me and understand the results that I can get. I could blow your mind with all sorts of stats and numbers, but ultimately our average increase is 963% more than what the insurance company initially offered. Okay. And that doesn't include some of the claims that I've been able to take from 25,000 to $5.3 million, right? Because I don't think people would really like believe those numbers. But ultimately, first and foremost, is if you have a good contractor, right? I think like how I build my team in life is having good people in different areas that can help me when I need them. And one is having a really good contractor, a roofer, GC, or somebody that you know and trust that again has your best interest at heart, is putting your interest before theirs, right? Sometimes that's hard to find, but when you find that person, stick with them because those are the people that understand how the process works. And in my world, there's just contractors that put on roofs, and then there's insurance restoration contractors. Insurance restoration contractors are the people that I would go with because they understand the process and they know how the game works, right? They understand like, hey, this is what the insurance company is probably going to do. If we don't get enough money, then we need to get a public adjuster involved and see what they can do. So I'm a licensed public insurance adjuster. And so that is my technical title. And so if you are, if your viewers and audience are looking for somebody to help them, that's what you want to Google, public insurance adjuster, and then ask them questions about, hey, what is your knowledge? What is your expertise? How do you operate? How do you get paid? What does that look like? How long does this process take? And there's a varying question or varying answers to all of those questions, depending on if it's commercial or residential, right? Commercial policies and claims can take multiple years. The nice thing about that is on the commercial side, it's usually not at like, hey, my roof is leaking onto my bed where I sleep at night. It's, I can deal with it. We just put some buckets out and we'll take care of that for now and do some leak detection and chasing those leaks and maybe making repairs and things like that. Versus if it's a residential claim, it's a much more immediate need that that people have in regards to that. But ultimately, one of the things, and I think the way you and I met is on LinkedIn. And so I try to get the word out to the people that I do business with that also know people that they do business with that could refer me, just knowing and understanding what I do and how I do it, and that I'm competent and trustworthy, things like that.
Awesome, awesome. That's one of the things that I do like about like I said, creating the content because like you said, that's how I found you. Is
Right.
I saw some of the videos that you had done. So I mean, when you meet a lot of different people, for you and I, it may seem normal to create the content, put it out
Yeah.
there on social media sites, but I'm often amazed when I meet other professionals, like that just doesn't seem to register on their mind as a thing to do. So what
Yeah.
got you into creating content and putting it out there on social media?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, the truth is, the reason I did it was because I was scared. I had so much fear around doing videos, right? And my buddy and I, we did a 30-day Facebook Live challenge. So there were live videos. We were just like, okay. And the first couple, like I would say the first 3 or 4 days, and we were brutally honest with each other. So what we would do is we had to be at least 2 minutes and not to exceed like 4 minutes. So you could actually create that content. So we kind of had some rules around it. And then the other guy would Voxer the other person and give them feedback on, like, what does your eye contact look like? What is the speed? What is the cadence? Is your volume good? And so we were really brutally honest with each other for 30 days, and it was freaking terrible. Like the first 10 days, 15 days, I was terrible at it. I hated it. I did not want to do it anymore. And then after day 30, I was like, man, this is easy now, right? And so ultimately, the reason I did it is because I was scared to do it. And a friend of mine was brave enough to say, hey, let's do this together. You're terrible at this. I'm terrible at this. Let's see if we can get better at doing this together. And so we did. And it's made all the difference in the world, because I know, just like you, so many people are scared and have so much fear around creating videos, and they shouldn't, right? And it's like you create your first 10 videos, you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting better. And now I've been doing this, going on, like, this January will be 5 years since I started doing my denial of the day videos on LinkedIn. And I can't tell you how impactful that has been for the people that watch them, and also my business. It's been amazing. So if your audience is watching this and they are scared to do videos, I would encourage them to start now, because, like, look at all the platforms that are succeeding right now in social media or otherwise. They're almost all videos.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it has been a night and day difference for us. I mean, for even for our firm, it's just being able to get out there and talk to the audiences that we help and we support, and even just creating strategic relationships. So I strongly encourage people to do that. So, I would say, for those of you that are listening, if you're an accounting firm, law firm, and you want to learn a little bit more, other than finding you on LinkedIn, where can people find you online on your website?
Yeah, so my website is the best place, and then it connects to a bunch of other things, but it's bellatorclaims.com. And it'll kind of give you a showcase of the type of claims that we work. We do commercial claims, industrial claims, school districts, and municipalities right now. And I will kind of toot my own horn here, but ultimately we're working with a school district down in Denver, and we've been able to take that claim from $277,000 to $7.8 million for the school district.
Wow, that is impressive. And I think it is definitely life changing for that
Right.
institution to be able to provide the quality that they need, and to get focused back on doing what they do. Because, as you said, most people don't file a claim every day, so they have no idea how to even navigate that process on their own.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And the thing is, we all have lives, right? Like, you with your firm, me with my firm. Obviously, I do this pretty much every day, but ultimately, like, the school district and the risk manager, they're not just managing the risk of this insurance claim. They have a ton of other stuff, thousands and thousands of students, and I'm sure many, many incidences and things like that that they have to really put their attention to. And then, oh yeah, we also have to worry about this insurance claim. It should never be like that. When you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, it should be like, hey, this insurance claim should be at the top of the priority list. And if we can't handle it, we need to hire someone that can. So yeah, absolutely, man.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. Again, I would say, for accounting finance professionals out there, I mean, some of you may have, industrial commercial clients that, they may unfortunately face a need for an insurance claim. And if they're having issues there, I mean, hey, you know people like Taylor are great to bring into the conversation just to make sure that they can be made whole to get back to the business that they are really in instead of having to spend a ton of time fighting with the insurance company trying to figure out something that they really just don't understand. So, yeah,
Right.
definitely thank you. So, before we wrap up, Taylor, one of the
Yeah.
things that I always love asking people is, when you listen to podcasts, a lot of times, there's a lot of great things that get shared. And so, if you were talking to someone to say, hey, I was on the finance and accounting show with Terrell, and hey, if you go back and you listen to that episode, hey, here are two big takeaways that I really want you to focus on in that conversation that I had with Terrell. What would your two big takeaways be?
One I would say is the power of the policy. We didn't really get too far into that, but that is the crux of everything that I do and that I'm here for, is because there's a policy in place that dictates how the claim should be paid. So one, make sure you have the right policy in place. And two, know that you have options, right? The options that you have are limited sometimes by the policy and by state laws or local municipal things. So the sooner that you get someone involved to help you, the better, because it actually opens up more options, because the longer it goes, those options diminish due to time.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for, coming on. It was definitely a pleasure having you as a guest on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Finance and Accounting Show. If you like what you heard, don't be selfish. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then share this with a friend, because you know a business owner that could definitely use this insight. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the updates when we release a new episode.